If I ask you to picture like the ultimate symbol of permanent, unchanging wealth, your mind probably goes straight to something like Fort Knox.
Oh, absolutely. Stacked gold bars all the way to the
No,
ceiling.
exactly. Behind those massive steel vault doors, there is just this inherent trust we place in gold. It's the universal standard of value.
It really is. And I think a lot of that trust is largely physical. Like
Huh.
when you actually hold a piece of solid gold, your brain immediately registers its incredible density.
Yeah, it's heavy.
Exactly. It feels undeniable. It's a sensory experience that practically screams, authenticity and permanence.
Yeah, you feel that weight in your hand and you just think, okay, this is real. But what if I told you that someone could hand you one of those standard gold bars and it would feel absolutely 100% perfect in your hand?
Like indistinguishable.
Indistinguishable, the exact same unmistakable weight, the exact same sheer density. But inside, beneath just a really thin layer of gold plating, it is hiding a completely different, completely unexpected element. An element that actually started its human history as this frustrating, frothy, useless mess that 17th century miners just absolutely despised.
It's the ultimate elemental deception.
Yeah.
And what makes that deception so compelling, I think, is that this imposter metal, along with its chemical cousin from the exact same neighborhood on the periodic table, isn't just tricking counterfeiters.
No, not at all.
Right. These elements are quietly holding together the very fabric of life on Earth.
Welcome to the deep dive. Whether you are listening to this while, prepping for a heavy-duty university chemistry exam, or maybe you're an engineer trying to wrap your head around industrial metallurgy, or honestly, if you're just intensely curious about the secret, invisible building blocks of the universe, you are in the perfect place.
Absolutely.
Today, our mission is to journey to the very bottom rows of the periodic table. We are going to uncover two heavy elements hiding in plain sight, molybdenum and tungsten.
Yeah.
We're going to explore how a dense metal used to fake gold bars and weight your golf clubs, by the way, is actually the ancient evolutionary key to life on Earth.
It's a genuinely remarkable story of planetary history. And to guide us today, we are drawing on a stack of three incredibly detailed sources.
We've got a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. We have a comprehensive, peer-reviewed Bioinorganic chemistry paper published in MDPI, which focuses on the role of molybdenum and tungsten in biology. We are pairing that with a historical and industrial overview of tungsten provided by Sam Sputter Targets.
Right.
And we are rounding it out with this fascinating, very practical application guide from the University of Toledo's Instrumentation Center.
So just to set the stage for you, the listener, when we talk about metals in biology, we usually hear about the absolute celebrities of the human body.
The famous ones.
Yeah, we hear about the iron in our red blood cells carrying oxygen, or we hear about the zinc in our immune system, or copper helping our nervous system.
Right, the everyday supplements.
Exactly. And if you look at a periodic table, those metals all live in the exact same upper neighborhood. They are from the first row of the transition metals, the upper D block.
Yeah.
But today's stars, molybdenum and tungsten, they live downstairs. They are heavy.
They reside in the second and third rows of the D block, respectively. And what is crucial to understand right from the start of our conversation today is that molybdenum and tungsten are the only elements from those heavier lower rows that are known to be essential for biology.
Wait, really? The only ones?
The only ones. Nature looked at the vast array of heavy elements available in the Earth's crust and oceans and exclusively selected these two specific metals to perform some of the most difficult high-energy chemical tasks on the planet.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can even begin to understand how these massive heavy metals operate inside our microscopic cells, we really have to talk about how humanity first stumbled upon them.
Right.
And let me tell you, it is not a glamorous scientific origin story. It didn't start in some pristine laboratory. Let's travel back to 17th century Germany.
Okay, setting the scene.
Picture the Erzgebirge Mountains of Saxony. You have these miners doing this brutal, back-breaking labor, digging deep into the earth for tin, but they kept hitting this mysterious, annoying, highly destructive ore.
Yeah, and annoying is putting it incredibly mildly. You really have to put yourself in their shoes.
And it's furious.
Oh, totally. These miners were trying to smelt cassiterite, which is the primary mineral ore for tin. And smelting isn't just melting rock, right? It's a delicate chemical reduction process.
Right. They had to use charcoal.
Exactly. They would heat the cassiterite with charcoal to strip away the oxygen and leave behind pure, valuable tin. But this unknown foreign substance in the rock kept hijacking the chemical
It
reduction.
just completely ruined the batch.
It did. Instead of getting liquid tin pooling at the bottom of their furnaces, the process would just fail, and they were left with this useless, frothy, messy slag.
I try to imagine it like being a gardener. Say you, the listener, plant this beautiful, perfectly curated row of vegetables. You water it, you do the soil chemistry perfectly, and then this incredibly aggressive, deeply rooted weed just comes out of nowhere, chokes the roots, and completely ruins the entire harvest.
That's a great way to think about it.
You would absolutely hate it. And these German miners hated this rock. They gave this nuisance or these very aggressive nicknames. They called it Wolfert and Wolfram.
Which is brilliant.
Yeah, they literally called it wolf's froth because to them, it felt like a wild predator was coming into their furnaces and just eating their precious tin.
The visual of a wolf devouring the sheep, or in this case, the tin, was so strong that the nickname actually became permanent.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it's the reason why, if you look at the periodic table today, the chemical symbol for tungsten isn't T or 2, it's W.
Oh, for wolfram.
Exactly, for wolfram. It's a permanent monument to the frustration of 17th century miners. But actually isolating the element from that frothy slag took another century of scientific advancement.
So they just cursed it for 100 years.
Pretty much. But then in 1758, the Swedish chemist and mineralogist Axel Fredrik Cronstedt discovered a mineral that he strongly suspected contained a brand new, undocumented element. And he called the mineral tungsten.
Which, if you translate it from Swedish, literally means heavy stone.
Yep.
Not exactly the most creative name, I mean, but you can't argue with the accuracy.
It was entirely descriptive.
Yeah.
But identifying a mineral isn't the same as isolating a pure element. You had to fast forward a bit to 1781, and another legendary Swedish chemist, Carl Wilhelm Scheele, managed to extract a highly acidic compound from that heavy stone tungstic acid.
Okay.
He theorized that if someone could figure out how to chemically reduce this acid, they would finally uncover the hidden metal. But Scheele didn't quite get there himself.
So who finally did it?
It was actually two Spanish brothers, Juan José and Fausto Eliar, who finally cracked the code in 1783. They extracted the acid from wolframite, the very same mineral those German miners hated, and successfully reduced it using charcoal heat to produce the very first pure tungsten powder.
Wow. And from those humble, wildly frustrating beginnings, we now have this incredibly complex global industry.
Massive industry.
Yeah, today we know tungsten has 26 different isotopes, which are basically different variations of the atom with different numbers of neutrons, though only 5 of those isotopes are actually stable enough to stick around.
Right.
We produce around 61,000 tons of this stuff annually by extracting it from various ores around the globe. And here is a massive geopolitical reality we pulled from the Sam Sputter target source. China currently controls roughly 75 to 80% of the entire world's supply of tungsten.
Which is an astounding bottleneck when you consider how utterly vital the metal is to modern civilization.
Yeah, 80% is huge.
It is. What's fascinating here is the sheer irony of the historical arc. You have an element that was literally cursed by early miners as a nuisance, a literal wolf destroying their livelihoods.
Right.
Yet today, it is one of the most critical, irreplaceable materials in advanced global manufacturing, infrastructure, and, as we'll soon explore, the ancient fundamental biology of the entire planet.
Right, so let's dig into why it is so irreplaceable. We are moving from the dirt and soot of the 17th century mines to how the extreme physical properties of tungsten are harnessed in our everyday modern lives.
Let's do it.
And the first thing you have to understand is that tungsten can take the heat. It actually boasts the highest melting point of all known pure metals in the universe.
The highest.
We are talking 6,152 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 2,400 degrees Celsius for our metric listeners.
To put that in perspective, iron melts at about 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Tungsten more than doubles that.
That's insane.
At the atomic level, the bonds holding tungsten atoms together in their solid crystal lattice are so unfathomably strong that it takes a colossal amount of thermal kinetic energy to make them vibrate fast enough to break apart into a liquid.
So you just have to pump so much heat into it.
Exactly. That extreme thermal stability is why it became the backbone of so many heat-intensive human applications. For decades, if you turned on an old incandescent light bulb in your living room, you were passing electricity through a microscopic tungsten filament.
Right, the glowing wire.
Yes. The electrical resistance causes the metal to glow white hot. illuminating the room, but because of its insane melting point, the wire doesn't melt and break.
The University of Toledo's Instrumentation Center application guide actually highlights how it's literally in your kitchen and your garage right now.
Oh, yeah.
They point out it's used in the filaments of microwave ovens. It's generating the electromagnetic waves that heat up your leftovers. It's the solid core hidden inside car spark plugs.
Which takes a beating.
Seriously, think about what a spark plug has to constantly, repeatedly withstand the violent, high-temperature, explosive combustion happening inside an engine block thousands of times a minute.
Yep.
It's even the tiny, delicate wire inside a digital meat thermometer.
That thermometer application is just brilliant engineering. Because of that extreme melting point, you can weld a tungsten wire to a different metal inside the thermometer probe.
Okay, why two metals?
Well, as the temperature inside your roasting oven changes, the electrical resistance between the two different metals changes in a very predictable way. The thermometer reads that resistance and gives you an incredibly precise temperature reading.
Oh, that's clever.
And crucially, because it's tungsten, the probe doesn't degrade or warp or melt in the extreme heat of your oven. But heat resistance is really only half the story of tungsten's physical dominance. We have to talk about the heavy stone aspect, the sheer density.
The density factor is wild. Tungsten is so dense that it perfectly, almost mathematically matches the density of pure gold.
Down to the decimal point, practically.
Which brings us right back to the Fort Knox deception we started with. If you are a counterfeiter, this is your dream scenario.
It's too perfect.
You can take a block of relatively cheap industrial tungsten, machine it to the exact dimensions of a standard gold brick, and then plate it in a thin layer of real gold. Because the density is identical, that fake brick will pass every traditional weight and displacement test.
It will feel exactly like solid gold to the human hand.
That is just terrifying for banks.
Well, the physics of why it feels the same are simple, right? Density is just mass divided by volume. Tungsten packs an enormous amount of atomic mass into a very tight atomic radius.
Okay.
But that same dense packing is utilized for far more legitimate, highly engineered purposes where maximum weight is required, but space is severely limited.
Like where?
For example, race car engineers use heavy tungsten alloys as ballast. They hide these small blocks of tungsten deep down in the lower frame rails of the chassis.
Oh, to lower the center of gravity.
Exactly. It lowers the car's center of gravity drastically without taking up valuable mechanical space that they need for the engine or the suspension.
That makes total sense. It's heavily used in sports too, right? Like if you watch professional dart players, they are throwing darts made of tungsten.
Yeah, they are.
Why? Because you can make the barrel of the dart incredibly thin, which allows you to group 3 darts really tightly together in the bullseye on the dartboard without them bouncing off each other. But because it's tungsten, that tiny thin dart is still heavy enough to throw with absolute precision.
It's the perfect material for it.
And golf club manufacturers do the exact same thing. They hide small tungsten weights in the absolute bottom soles of drivers and irons. That lowers the center of gravity of the club head, which acts like a lever to help you, the golfer, launch the golf ball higher and faster into the air.
And we shouldn't overlook the environmental impact either. Tungsten has largely replaced toxic lead in fishing weights.
Oh, that's a big one.
It is. Because it's so incredibly dense, a tiny tungsten fishing weight sinks incredibly fast through the water column. But unlike lead, which poisons waterfowl and aquatic life if it breaks off or gets swallowed, tungsten is largely inert. It's entirely non-toxic to the aquatic ecosystem.
Okay, so let me summarize. It's incredibly heavy, it survives extreme explosive heat, and it's durable. The University of Toledo guide mentions it's used to make those super scratch-resistant, inexpensive modern wedding rings you see everywhere.
The dark gray ones?
Yeah. And it's used in industrial drill bits that can drill sub-millimeter microscopic holes through solid rock and structural steel.
Right.
But wait, earlier, you said that the Elhuar brothers isolated pure tungsten powder. And the sources explicitly state that pure elemental tungsten is actually incredibly soft and pliable.
It is.
So how does a soft metal suddenly become a scratch-resistant wedding ring or an indestructible diamond-cutting drill bit? That feels like a complete scientific paradox to me. Am I misunderstanding the chemistry here?
No, not at all. You've hit on a really crucial distinction. It's a super common point of confusion. It does seem entirely contradictory.
Yeah, it doesn't add up.
But the key operating word in that historical account is pure. Pure elemental tungsten, just sitting by itself, is indeed quite soft. The layers of tungsten atoms can slide past each other relatively easily.
Okay.
But when human engineering intervenes, we almost never use tungsten in its pure elemental state for structural applications. We use alloys and compounds. And the most famous of these is tungsten carbide.
Okay, so tungsten carbide, that's a combination of tungsten and carbon. I guess my question is, how does adding something like carbon, which is just graphite or coal,
Right.
make a soft metal indestructible? Is it like weaving carbon fibers into the metal?
Not quite weaving, you have to visualize the atomic structure. Imagine a ball pit filled with massive, heavy bowling balls.
Okay, got the bowling balls.
Those are your tungsten atoms. If you push on them, they can roll and slide past each other. That's why the pure metal is soft. Now imagine taking millions of tiny, hard marbles. These are your carbon atoms and pouring them into the ball pit.
Oh, I see.
The small carbon atoms slip into the empty interstitial spaces right between the massive tungsten atoms.
Ah, so they act like atomic mortar. They lock the bowling balls in place so they can't slide around anymore.
Precisely. The atomic lattice is fundamentally changed. The carbon locks the tungsten atoms in a rigid, immovable structure. The resulting compound, tungsten carbide, is incredibly tough. It ranks just below actual diamonds on the Mohs hardness scale.
Wow, just below diamond.
Yeah, that extreme rigidity is what your scratch-resistant wedding ring is made of. It's what allows a microscopic drill bit to maintain its razor-sharp edge while spinning at tens of thousands of RPMs through solid steel without shattering or dulling.
That makes total sense now. The marbles stop the bowling balls from moving.
Exactly.
And the Toledo guide mentions it's used in glass-to-metal seals and specialized windows using a compound called tungsten 6 oxide because it has an incredibly low coefficient of thermal expansion.
Meaning it doesn't warp or swell when the temperature changes drastically.
Right. It's even ground into a fine powder, mixed into a pliable putty, and wrapped around X-ray tubes in hospitals to act as a flexible radiation shield. It's just a master of extremes: extreme heat, extreme density, extreme hardness.
It is the ultimate heavy-duty tool of the macroscopic human world.
Exactly. But here is the major pivot of our deep dive. We have established that tungsten is this absolute heavyweight champion for massive human engineering projects. Now, I want you, the listener, to shrink your perspective down to the microscopic level.
Let's go small.
Down to the cellular biological level. We said at the top of the show that biology selectively picked molybdenum and tungsten out of all the heavy metals available on Earth.
Right.
But why? I mean, why did nature look at an environment totally filled with abundant, easy-to-grab, lightweight metals like iron and copper and say, no, for these specific cellular jobs, I need the heavy stuff from the absolute bottom of the periodic table?
To understand nature's selection process and why biology goes to the trouble of sourcing these rare, heavy elements, we first have to look at the chemistry of the alternatives.
The lighter metals.
Yeah. Those first-row transition metals you mentioned,
Hmm.
iron, copper, cobalt, manganese, as you noted, they are highly abundant in the Earth's crust. And crucially, from a biochemical perspective, they have very fast ligand exchange rates.
Let's pause and define that. What exactly is a ligand, and why does exchanging it fast matter?
A ligand is essentially any molecule or ion that binds to a central metal atom to form a complex. In biology, proteins use these ligands like the nitrogen or oxygen atoms in their amino acids to hold on to a metal ion.
So it's like a claw holding the metal.
Exactly. Because metals like iron and copper drop and grab these ligands very rapidly, they are incredibly kinetically active. They're fantastic for fast, dynamic biological processes. They act quickly.
Okay, so they are the quick turnaround workers of the cell. They get the job done fast.
Yes, but that incredible speed and reactivity come with a severe, potentially lethal downside.
First-row metals are highly prone to reacting with oxygen through wild, uncontrolled redox processes where electrons are transferred back and forth. When iron or copper reacts with oxygen willy-nilly inside a cell, they frequently accidentally create what biochemists call reactive oxygen species, or ROS.
ROS. I've seen that term on skin care bottles. Antioxidants are supposed to fight ROS.
Yeah.
You might also hear them called free radicals, right? Things like superoxide or hydrogen peroxide.
Exactly. Free radicals have an unpaired electron, which makes them highly, violently chemically reactive. They desperately want to steal an electron from whatever is nearby to stabilize themselves.
And from what I understand, when they start stealing electrons, they act like cellular wrecking balls.
That is an incredibly apt description. In very small, tightly controlled amounts, our cells actually use ROS for signaling. But when they're generated uncontrolled by these fast, messy metal reactions, they cause massive oxidative stress.
Like internal rust.
Worse, They will literally rip electrons away from structural proteins, causing them to fragment. They will tear apart the delicate lipid membranes that hold the cell together, and most terrifyingly, they will shred strands of DNA, leading to mutations.
Yikes. So, if a biological system needs to perform a delicate, high-energy chemical reaction involving oxygen without blowing up the cell with reactive oxygen species, iron and copper are simply too volatile, too risky to use.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let me try an analogy here to see if I'm grasping this. I like to think of this cellular environment like a massive commercial restaurant kitchen.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Iron and copper are like your frantic, high-speed line cooks. They get the orders out incredibly fast. They're everywhere at once, but they are incredibly messy. They are throwing flour across the room, leaving grease spills, knocking over hot pots that mess these ROS damage, the free radicals.
Right.
Molybdenum and tungsten, on the other hand, are like precise, meticulous Michelin star pastry chefs. They work a bit slower, but they leave the kitchen totally spotless.
That is a highly accurate and brilliant analogy. Let's look at the chemistry of why they are the Michelin star chefs. Molybdenum and tungsten are 4 and 5-bed metals. Their larger atomic structure allows them to smoothly, predictably, and cleanly cycle between a +4 and +6 oxidation state.
Meaning they can smoothly give up or take on exactly 2 electrons at a time.
Exactly. They specialize in clean 2-electron redox reactions. They can grab an oxygen atom, hold it incredibly tightly, and transfer it directly to a biological substrate molecule. No mess.
So no stray single electrons flying off into the cellular fluid to create a superoxide radical.
None. They perform the transfer, cleanly shift their oxidation state, and leave the cell completely unharmed.
And they can do that because they form incredibly strong bonds with oxygen, right? The MDPI Bioinorganic paper specifically mentions they form stable M=O or metal-oxo, multiple bonds. But how do they hold on so much tighter than iron can?
It comes down to something called d-e orbital overlap. You can think of atomic orbitals as three-dimensional clouds of probability where electrons live. Because molybdenum and tungsten are so massive, their outer orbitals are physically much larger and extend further out from the nucleus than the smaller orbitals of iron or copper.
So they have a wider reach.
Yes, and because of that wider reach, their orbitals can overlap perfectly with the orbitals of an incoming oxygen atom. Imagine 2 complex 3D puzzle pieces sliding perfectly together, creating a massive area of shared electron density.
Wow. Okay.
This creates an incredibly strong, stable double bond. Because that bond is so secure, the tungsten or molybdenum enzyme can tightly control the reaction intermediates. They hold the oxygen in a vice grip. They don't drop the ball mid-reaction.
But wait, if we look specifically at tungsten, and I have to admit, this part of the source material completely blew my mind. It's not just about having bigger orbitals.
Oh no, it gets much weirder.
It's about fundamental physics breaking down at the atomic level. We are talking about relativistic effects happening inside a biological enzyme.
Yes. This is exactly where hardcore quantum chemistry meets Albert Einstein's theory of relativity. It is mind-bending.
Break it down for me.
Okay, so in a massive, heavy atom like tungsten, you have 74 protons packed into the nucleus. That creates an immense, incredibly powerful positive charge pulling inward on the negatively charged electrons.
Right, opposites attract, so the nucleus is violently pulling the electrons inward.
To avoid falling into that massively positive nucleus, the core electrons, the ones in the innermost orbitals, have to orbit the nucleus at absolutely terrifying speeds. We are talking about speeds approaching a significant fraction of the speed of light.
Wait, literally, they are moving so fast they start to experience special relativity.
Exactly. And according to Einstein's special relativity, as an object approaches the speed of light, its relativistic mass increases.
Right, E=mc² stuff.
Exactly. Because the mass of those inner electrons artificially increases, their inner S&P orbitals actually shrink. They contract closer and tighter to the nucleus.
Okay, so the inner layers shrink. How does that affect the outer layers that are actually doing the chemistry?
Here's the critical counterintuitive part.
Yeah.
Because those inner orbital clouds contract so tightly around the nucleus, they act as a dense shield. They perfectly screen the massive positive charge of the nucleus from the outermost electrons.
Ah.
Because the outer electrons suddenly feel less pull from the center, the outer 5e orbitals actually expand outward.
Okay, let me make sure I have this. Tungsten's outer grabbing arms The orbitals it uses to bond with other molecules actually get longer and reach further out because its inner core electrons are moving near the speed of light and warping their own mass.
You've synthesized that perfectly, yes.
That is absurd.
It is.
Yeah.
And that radial expansion of the 5' orbitals fundamentally changes tungsten's chemical behavior. It radically lowers tungsten's reduction potential. It makes the atom a much, much better electron acceptor than its cousin molybdenum, especially at extreme high temperatures.
Okay.
Tungsten can hold on to high oxidation states far more stably because those expanded orbitals overlap so well with ligands.
Okay, I am fascinated, but I have to push back here.
Go for it.
If molybdenum and tungsten are so perfect, if they are these clean, precise Michelin star chefs that don't cause DNA shredding free radicals, and they literally harness the theory of relativity to do perfectly stable chemistry, why aren't we made mostly of them?
That's a fair question.
If they are the superior metals, why did our bodies and the bodies of almost every animal still evolve to rely heavily on the messy line cooks like iron and copper?
You're approaching this from an engineering mindset, assuming biology optimizes for perfection. But biology doesn't optimize for perfection. It optimizes for survival based on what is available.
Oh, right.
It comes down to the brutal pragmatism of early evolution. Availability and kinetic lability dictated the baseline of life.
Meaning whatever is cheap and fast wins the evolutionary race.
Exactly. Iron and copper are just vastly more abundant in the Earth's crust and oceans. They were everywhere. And their fast, messy reactions were good enough for early, rapid evolutionary development.
They just dealt with the mess.
Right. Cells evolved ways to mitigate the ROS damage like antioxidants, because the trade-off of using fast, cheap iron was worth it. Biology is opportunistic. Molybdenum and tungsten are rare. They are heavy, and because they hold on to things so tightly, their reactions are relatively slow.
So nature reserved them.
Yes, only for the most highly specific, intensely difficult chemical tasks that absolutely require tight, flawless control of reaction intermediates, where the messy first-row metals would fail catastrophically.
Wow. So they are the elite special forces of the periodic table. You don't send them in for everyday traffic stops. You only call them in when absolutely no one else can do the job, and precision is a matter of life or death.
That's a great way to put it.
So if both molybdenum and tungsten are these clean, highly specialized biological tools, which one came first? That brings us to a really fascinating narrative hidden in the MDPI paper about the deep history of our planet. It's essentially a tale of two Earths.
If we look closely at the evolutionary and geological record, the biochemistry of tungsten actually predates molybdenum biochemistry. Tungsten is the ancient primordial ancestor in this evolutionary story.
If you're listening right now, try to paint a mental picture of what that world looked like. Why would biology choose tungsten first?
Well, you have to erase your image of the Earth as a blue, hospitable marble. 3.5 billion years ago, the Earth was an alien, violently hostile world.
Like a literal hellscape.
Yeah, the atmosphere was highly reducing, meaning it was completely starved of free oxygen, and the planet was incredibly hot. It was covered in acidic, boiling anoxic oceans, violently churning with volcanic activity.
Okay, so how did tungsten fit into that?
In those specific chemical conditions, tungsten was highly soluble. It dissolved easily into the water in the form of the tungstate ion, making it readily available for emerging microscopic life to grab.
And molybdenum.
Molybdenum, on the other hand, was chemically trapped. It was largely locked away in solid, highly insoluble sulfide minerals at the bottom of the ocean.
So tungsten was just floating around in the primordial soup ready to be used. And because of those relativistic effects we just unpacked, its lower temperature-sensitive redox potential made it the absolute perfect catalyst for microscopic organisms trying to survive in these wildly fluctuating, boiling thermal environments.
Exactly. Tungsten thrives in the heat. And we know this isn't just a theoretical model, because the biological descendants of that primordial era are still alive on Earth right now.
Wait, really? Where?
There are extremophilic prokaryotes, single-celled organisms like certain species of archaea that live today in boiling, deep-sea hydrothermal vents at temperatures between 80 and 100 degrees Celsius.
That's literal boiling water.
Yeah, and these organisms still exclusively use ancient tungsten enzymes to survive. They are living, breathing biochemical fossils of the primordial Earth.
But obviously, the world didn't stay a boiling, toxic, oxygen-free soup. Something massive happened that shifted the balance of power from tungsten to molybdenum.
The Great Oxidation Event. Around 2.4 billion years ago, something miraculous evolved. Cyanobacteria.
The green algae, guys.
Right. These microscopic organisms figured out how to perform photosynthesis, and the byproduct of their photosynthesis was free oxygen. Over millions of years, they pumped massive, unprecedented amounts of oxygen into the atmosphere and the oceans,
And that completely changed the chemistry of the planet.
utterly transformed it. As the oceans oxygenated, all those insoluble molybdenum sulfide minerals at the bottom of the sea reacted with the oxygen. They oxidized into the molybdate ion, which, unlike the sulfide, is highly water-soluble.
And suddenly, molybdenum dissolved into the oceans and completely flooded the biological market.
It did. In fact, if you test the oceans today, molybdenum is the single most abundant transition metal in seawater.
Wow. And what happened to tungsten?
Conversely, as the oceans became more alkaline and oxygen-rich, tungsten became far less chemically bioavailable. It fell out of solution, so life had to adapt to survive.
Right.
As the planet cooled down and oxygenated, evolutionary biology slowly transitioned from utilizing the ancient heat-loving tungsten to utilizing the newly abundant oxygen-friendly molybdenum.
I want to ask a highly speculative question here, taking what we've just learned and applying it to space exploration.
Oh, I love astrobiology questions.
If NASA sends a space probe tomorrow to an incredibly hot, harsh, completely oxygen-starved exoplanet somewhere in another solar system, should we stop scanning the atmosphere for carbon or oxygen and instead start scanning for tungsten signatures to find alien life?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of astrobiology, absolutely. The ongoing presence of tungsten-dependent enzymes in Earth's deep-sea vents is a literal time capsule of a primordial, harsh state.
Because it works so perfectly in those conditions.
Yes, astrobiologists are keenly aware of this mechanism. If you're pointing a telescope at a hyperthermal, highly reducing planet, you shouldn't be looking for aerobic, iron-using, oxygen-breathing life. That biology wouldn't survive.
It would burn up or just fail.
Exactly. You should be looking for the biochemical signatures of tungsten utilization. Understanding tungsten biochemistry completely broadens our scientific parameters for what extraterrestrial life might look like and how it might function on a hostile world.
That is just incredible to think about. We might find alien life by looking for the metal we use in our golf clubs.
It's weird but true.
But coming back down from space to modern Earth, since molybdenum eventually won that ancient turf war and took over the oxygenated world, what exactly is it doing inside us and our ecosystem right now? Our sources suggest that molybdenum is really the unsung hero of the entire global biosphere.
It truly is. It's
Yeah.
not an exaggeration to say we owe our existence to it. And the most monumental, world-altering task it performs is a process called nitrogen fixation.
Okay, let's break that down.
This is the biological process that takes inert atmospheric nitrogen gas N2 and converts it into ammonia, NH4+. Ammonia is the biologically a variable form of nitrogen that plants desperately need to grow.
Right, it's fertilizer.
Exactly. Animals then eat those plants, and we humans eat the animals and the plants. Without this specific biological process, the entire global food web and complex life on Earth would essentially grind to a halt. We would run out of the building blocks for DNA and proteins.
And the biological machine, the enzyme responsible for this heavy lifting, is called nitrogenase. And sitting right at the absolute heart of nitrogenase is a microscopic cluster of atoms called the FOMOCO cluster.
Iron molybdenum cofactor.
Right. So the bacteria living quietly in the dirt of your garden use this molybdenum-anchored enzyme to reach up, pull nitrogen out of the air, and turn it into natural fertilizer.
To truly appreciate how insanely difficult this chemical task is, you have to understand the nitrogen molecule itself. N2 gas makes up about 78% of the air we breathe.
Mm.
It is two nitrogen atoms held together by a triple covalent bond.
A triple bond. That's strong.
It is one of the strongest, tightest, most unreactive chemical bonds in all of nature. Breaking that bond requires a massive, almost violent amount of energy.
Like industrial levels of energy?
Yes. Humans eventually figured out how to break it industrially in the early 20th century using something called the Haber-Bosch process to make synthetic fertilizer. But the Haber-Bosch process requires massive industrial steel factories, hundreds of degrees of heat, and crushing atmospheric pressure to force the bond apart.
So what does this all mean? I have to push back here because this sounds like magic.
It does seem impossible.
You're telling me that a microscopic, fragile enzyme sitting in cold, wet dirt is doing the exact same chemical process as our most massive, energy-intensive industrial factories. But it's doing it for free, at room temperature, without massive pressure. How is that physically, thermodynamically possible?
It is arguably the greatest marvel of biological engineering on the planet. The mechanism has been heavily studied for decades, and the most widely accepted scientific model is called the low-Thornley mechanism.
Okay, how does it work?
Basically, the FOMOCO cluster inside the bacterial enzyme doesn't just smash the triple bond apart with brute force like our factories do. It uses finesse. It painstakingly, meticulously feeds electrons and protons into that nitrogen triple bond one by one.
It's like picking a complex vault lock instead of blowing the vault door off with dynamite.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. It takes 8 distinct, highly coordinated steps. The enzyme burns cellular energy in the form of ATP to lower the system's redox potential, which allows it to transfer a single electron into the metallic cluster.
One by one?
One by one. It repeats this process, slowly building up a highly reduced energy-dense state. It even stores hydrogen atoms as chemical hydrides directly on the metal cluster.
Wow.
It builds up this tension until it has enough raw reductive power to gently force the stubborn nitrogen molecule to accept the electrons. This slowly destabilizes and breaks the triple bond, ultimately releasing 2 fully formed molecules of ammonia.
And the MDPI paper notes something fascinating about the speed of this. It says this process is painfully, agonizingly slow. It takes about 1 full second for the enzyme to complete a single catalytic cycle.
Right.
In the world of biochemistry, where enzymes usually catalyze reactions thousands or millions of times a second, 1 second is practically an eternity.
It is incredibly slow, but that is the unavoidable cost of absolute chemical precision. And you asked earlier how molybdenum allows this. For a long time, scientists naturally assumed the incoming nitrogen gas must bind directly to the molybdenum atom to be broken apart.
That makes intuitive sense, right? It's the heavy metal.
Right, but recent advanced structural research suggests that the nitrogen actually binds to the central iron atoms in the cluster, not the molybdenum.
Wait, really? So what is the molybdenum even doing there? Why is it essential if it's not the one actually grabbing and breaking the nitrogen?
It acts as an indispensable, finely tuned structural anchor. Molybdenum has this unique, massive atomic ability to tweak the electronic properties of the entire surrounding iron-sulfur cluster.
Like adjusting the tension on a guitar string.
Exactly. It subtly shifts the coordination of the atoms. It actually elongates one specific molecular bond, which perfectly geometrically positions the iron cluster to capture the nitrogen, and it acts as a funnel to guide the protons exactly where they need to go.
That's amazing.
If you biochemically remove the molybdenum atom from the enzyme, or even slightly alter its attached cofactor, the enzyme's nitrogen-fixing activity drops by over 90%. It doesn't play the instrument, but it is the conductor of the entire orchestra.
But there is a massive evolutionary vulnerability here, right? We mentioned earlier that early Earth didn't have oxygen. Nitrogenase, this incredibly complex lock-picking enzyme, evolved in an oxygen-free world.
Right.
So what happens when this ancient oxygen-hating enzyme tries to operate in today's highly oxygenated soil?
It is a massive biological conflict. The enzyme is exceptionally sensitive to oxygen. If O2 molecules get into the nitrogenase active site, the oxygen will violently react with the metals and irreversibly destroy the FOMOCO cluster.
It just fries it.
The enzyme is dead. So aerobic bacteria that need oxygen to breathe and also need to fix nitrogen, have had to evolve brilliant, desperate defense mechanisms.
Like what?
Some bacteria literally build physical, microscopic blast shields.
You're kidding.
No. They produce a specialized protein called Fixation. When this protein detects rising oxygen levels in the cell, it physically wraps around the nitrogenase enzyme, forming dense, protective filaments.
It just cocoons it.
It locks the enzyme down into a safe, inactive state. It waits until the cellular oxygen levels drop back down to safe margins, at which point the shield unwinds, and the enzyme goes back to work making fertilizer.
That is just wild to think about. You have microscopic single-celled organisms building physical blast shields to protect their delicate molybdenum engines from the very air they breathe.
Life finds a way.
It really does. But we shouldn't just focus on bacteria. We humans need molybdenum too, right?
We absolutely do. While we don't fix nitrogen, humans have 4 specific, highly specialized enzymes that absolutely require molybdenum to function.
4 enzymes.
Yeah. Our biological daily requirement is tiny, though we only need about 45 micrograms a day, which is like a speck of dust. We easily get that from a normal diet containing milk, legumes, nuts, and organ meats.
But if you lack that tiny speck of molybdenum, the physiological consequences are catastrophic.
They are.
Yeah, the sources talk about 2 of these human enzymes specifically, and the effects of deficiency are terrifying. The first enzyme is called sulfite oxidase. Its job in the body is to oxidize sulfite into sulfate.
Right, which is a crucial non-negotiable step in how our human bodies process and safely excrete sulfur-containing amino acids from the proteins we eat.
And if a child is born with a rare genetic mutation that causes a deficiency in sulfite oxidase, the results are devastating. Because the enzyme can't function without its molybdenum center, highly toxic sulfites rapidly build up in the bloodstream and tissues.
It's tragic.
It really is. This causes severe, rapid, and progressive neurological damage, seizures, and tragically, usually early childhood death. It is a sobering reminder of how utterly dependent our massive, complex nervous systems are on this one rare trace heavy metal.
Absolutely. The second human enzyme they highlight is xanthine oxidase. This one handles the metabolic breakdown of purines in our body.
Purines, those are in like red meat and beer, right?
Yeah, they are compounds found in our DNA and in certain foods. The enzyme turns these broken down purines into uric acid, so our kidneys can easily excrete them in our urine. But this enzyme is a bit of a double-edged sword for human health.
Why is that?
Well, xanthine oxidase is essential, but if it becomes overactive, often due to diet, genetics, or alcohol consumption, it produces way too much uric acid. The kidneys just can't clear it fast enough.
Oh, I know where this is going.
Yep. That excess uric acid starts to crystallize like tiny shards of glass in the body's joints, most famously in the big toe. This leads to a painfully inflammatory condition known as gout.
And the pain is supposed to be excruciating.
It is. But because we understand the role of molybdenum in this enzyme, modern pharmacology has an answer. Doctors treat gout with highly specific medications that chemically target and bind directly to the molybdenum active site in xanthine oxidase.
They just shut the enzyme down.
Exactly, blocking it and slowing the enzyme down to stop the production of uric acid.
So molybdenum is literally keeping our global agriculture alive. It's keeping our fragile nervous systems intact. And it's heavily involved in managing our internal biological waste.
Deeply embedded in modern life.
It is. But as we transition into our final section of the deep dive, we need to circle back to the wolf. We need to talk about tungsten again.
Ah, the heavy stone.
Because tungsten isn't just an obsolete evolutionary relic. It didn't just stay trapped in those boiling ocean vents. It is hiding in some incredibly surprising places, including, shockingly, inside our own human bodies. And scientists believe it might hold the key to the future of global green technology.
The absolute thermal and chemical resilience of these ancient tungsten enzymes is exactly what makes them so attractive to modern biochemists and engineers.
Give us an example.
Well, for instance, there is a specific tungsten-dependent enzyme called formate dehydrogenase found in certain bacteria. Normally, its job is to oxidize formate to fix carbon dioxide. But scientists discovered that under specific laboratory conditions, you can force this enzyme to run in reverse.
Wait, it can pull CO2 out of the air?
Yes. It can actively grab free carbon dioxide out of the surrounding environment and chemically reduce it.
Which is literally the holy grail of modern climate science.
Yeah.
We're spending billions trying to figure out carbon capture. If we could harness a self-replicating biological machine to actively pull CO2 out of the atmosphere, that could be a total game changer for climate change.
Exactly. And the reason they want to use tungsten enzymes for this, rather than other biological enzymes, is durability.
Because they can survive anything.
Right. Because tungsten enzymes evolved billions of years ago in boiling, highly acidic, harsh conditions. They are incredibly tough. They don't denature, unfold, or break down easily when you put them inside an industrial mechanical bioreactor.
They won't just fall apart.
No. Scientists are actively looking at bioengineering these extreme heat-resistant tungsten enzymes for massive industrial-scale CO2 remediation projects. They are also aggressively investigating them for treating severe nitrate pollution in agricultural wastewater, and even using microbially catalyzed tungsten systems to efficiently produce clean, green biofuels.
That industrial application makes sense given what we know about tungsten's durability, but the absolute most shocking fact I read in our sources, without a doubt, was the human-gut connection.
Oh, this part is wild.
We naturally think of tungsten as this alien boiling vent metal or a massive heavyweight hidden inside a race car. But the MDPI paper casually points out that tungsten is literally sitting inside our stomachs right now.
It is a remarkable, relatively recent scientific discovery that upended a lot of assumptions. There's a very dominant, common human gut microbe called Eubacterium lamosum.
Eubacterium lamosum.
Yes, it lives inside you right now. And it turns out this specific microbe actively seeks out and utilizes tungsten. It builds tungsten-dependent enzymes, specifically a class called aldehyde oxidorreductases, or AORs.
And what do those do?
The microbe uses these heavy metal enzymes to detoxify harmful reactive aldehydes that we accidentally ingest in our food or that are produced naturally by antimicrobial actions in the gut.
I cannot get over that. We have microscopic, ancient, heavy metal detoxifiers living inside our intestines. It's like having a tiny hazardous materials team down there saying, oh, you ate something slightly toxic. Let me just fire up the primordial tungsten engine and process that for you safely.
It's a perfect example of human-microbe symbiosis. But this raises a very important question for the future of medical research. If our microbiome is already naturally utilizing tungsten compounds to protect human tissue from toxins, what else could these heavy metals do for human health if we could properly engineer them?
Where is the research heading?
The pharmacological research in this area is expanding rapidly. Molybdenum, vanadium, and tungsten compounds are all currently showing highly significant real-world promise in pharmacology. They are actively being investigated as potent anti-diabetic agents.
Really? How so?
In lab settings, they are helping to normalize blood lipid levels, lower blood sugar, and even fight systemic obesity.
And even more aggressively, the Bioinorganic paper notes they are showing strong anti-neoplastic properties, meaning anti-cancer properties.
Yes, certain specifically engineered tungsten and molybdenum compounds have demonstrated a remarkable ability to inhibit the growth of tumor cells in vitro.
That's huge.
It is the exact same unique, stable redox chemistry that makes these metals so powerful and resilient in early Earth environments might make them incredibly powerful, highly targeted tools for disrupting the runaway metabolism of a cancer cell without generating widespread toxic free radicals.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and recap this incredible journey, because we have covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started with frustrated, soot-covered 17th century miners violently cursing the wolf's froth that was ruining their tin harvests. We looked at how modern human engineering took that impossibly dense, heat-resistant heavy stone and used it to perfectly balance our golf clubs, light our homes with incandescent bulbs, and occasionally forge highly deceptive fake gold bars.
The ultimate deception.
Right. Then we dove deep down to the quantum atomic level, seeing how Einstein's relativistic physics caused orbitals to expand, allowing tungsten to spark the very first extreme heat-loving life forms in boiling ancient oceans.
A literal time machine.
Finally, we saw how the Earth's great oxidation event handed the evolutionary baton over to molybdenum, creating the vital lock-picking enzymes that pull fertilizer from the air, feed the planet, and keep our fragile human nervous systems functioning.
It is a sprawling story of planetary, geological, and biological evolution, entirely told through the lens of two relatively obscure elements at the bottom of the periodic table.
It really is. But as we sign off, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought, an idea that synthesizes everything we've talked about today.
Okay, what's there?
We know from the Fort Knox deception that tungsten perfectly matches the density of gold, allowing it to trick people as a counterfeit. It's a master of physical disguise. And we just learned that its stable biological compounds are showing these powerful, targeted anti-cancer properties.
Right, so if you combine the synthesis of those two biological and physical facts.
Exactly. What if the massive medical breakthroughs of the next century involve engineering microscopic, heavy stone biological Trojan horses?
Oh, wow.
Could we theoretically use the extreme thermal and chemical stability of these ancient tungsten enzymes, disguise them biochemically to bypass the body's natural immune defenses, and deliver highly targeted extreme heat or highly reactive chemical therapies directly inside the core of a tumor?
That is a fascinating concept.
Because of tungsten's clean 2-electron redox chemistry, they could do their destructive work on the cancer cells without ever generating the stray reactive oxygen species that cause massive collateral damage to the fragile iron and copper-based healthy human cells surrounding the tumor.
Utilizing the primordial, boiling ocean resilience of tungsten to fight the ultimate modern cellular disease. It is a brilliant, highly plausible avenue for future oncological exploration.
Something for you to mull over. Thank you for joining us on this incredibly expansive deep dive. Hopefully the next time you swing a golf club, or turn on a microwave oven, or even just look at the wet dirt in your spring garden, you'll think a little differently about the heavy, hidden, relativistic elements making it all possible. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.